Hello and welcome. So today I'm gonna talk about the bullshit feminist lie called femicide. Okay, femicide is a term that is basically implying that there's some targeted, systematic killing of women out there because they're women, right? Some type of genocide against women. Okay, and this propaganda is spouted by the mainstream media and is spouted by the UN and other organizations, okay? And it's complete bullshit. It's a lie. It's a 100% lie, okay? To drum up a false victim narrative when the actual victims of violence, the majority of victims of violence in our society worldwide are male, okay? Men and boys, okay? So let's just get the facts straight on that, okay? So this is the Global Justice Center, and it says right here, genocide is often understood as a crime committed predominantly through organized mass killings, the majority of victims of which, both historically and today, tend to be male. Okay? The majority of victims, both historically and today, tend to be male. Okay? So there's that already. Yeah? And the victims of homicide statistics worldwide, 78.7% of homicide victims are men. Okay, so almost 80% of homicide victims worldwide are men. Okay, and even when we talk about domestic violence related deaths, okay, when domestic violence related suicides are combined with domestic violence homicides, the total number of domestic violence related deaths are higher for males than for females. Okay? And this is also not even taking into account that a lot of the male victims of domestic violence related homicides are actually not even captured by the statistics because proxy violence by women is not really captured in the statistics. I already made a video on that, okay? So let us go through this article, which talks about a new UN report, which further indicates that this lie of femicide is a lie, okay? So worldwide, 11% of all homicides involve women and 10% men as victims within the family. Okay, so this already tells us that there's no such thing as femicide, okay? Because the homicides related to family or inside the home, the victim rate in percentage for women is 11% versus the percentage for men is 10%. So it's just 1% difference, okay? It's just 1% difference. So how can it be that there's a femicide going on, yet the victim rates of men versus women is almost similar? Okay, and this is coming from the flawed UN report, which actually indicates that this victim rate for men is probably very, very underestimated. So it's probably more than just 10% for men, okay? The UN describes this as gender-based femicide that must be combated. Worldwide, 70% of all homicides involve men and 9% women as victims outside the family. Yes, and most homicides are actually outside the family. And it's not 70%, it's 80% at least, probably even more. You know, those numbers are always or almost always underestimating the male victims and probably overestimating the female victims. The UN apparently cannot recognize any gender-specific differences here and certainly no need for action. How it works? Let's continue reading. So the German Tagesschau reported on the new UN study on violence, and the Tagesschau is a German newspaper, 55% of all homicides against women are committed by family members or intimate partners, according to the report titled Gender-Based Homicides of Women and Girls, in brackets Femicide. Overall, women only make up 20% of all murder victims worldwide. 4 times as many murder victims are men or boys. 12% of homicides against men are committed at home. So what they're doing with these homicides committed at home is they compare the relative number, the relative statistics of male victims of homicides at home versus the absolute statistics, 48,800 homicide victims of women committed at home. They compare these. So they compare the female victims' absolute statistics and compare them to the relative statistics of the male victims. Okay, to make it seem like the female victim number is much higher when it comes to domestic homicides, even though it's actually almost the same. Even, it's 10% versus 11%. So this is a freaking statistical trickery that feminists always do. Okay? They play around with statistics to fool people. Okay? And to push a narrative. And also, when we look at the representation in the media, for example, if you look at the daily news report and evaluate how frequently the terms women, girls, men, and boys are mentioned, despite the significantly higher number of male homicide victims, women are mentioned 16 times, girls 9 times, and men 2 times, and only once boys. The analogous evaluation in the UN report results in 150 times women, 10 times men, 91 times girls, and 6 times boys. Referring only to adult victims, the comparison of the actual number of victims with the media and the UN reporting results in the following picture. So they mention in the UN and in the Tagesschau news report these amounts of times women, okay, and in those same reports these amounts of men, right? Even though just 20% of all victims of homicide are female, meanwhile 80% of victims of homicide are male. But they're not talking about any gender-specific targeting of men. They're not saying androcide is a thing, right? But they say femicide is a thing. This is fucking horseshit. And even when it comes to domestic violence, men face 31% greater risk of domestic violence than women. Okay? So yeah, this is just more evidence that this whole femicide narrative is just horseshit. Okay, this new UN report actually is evidence against femicide, even though the UN actually propagates this lie. Okay? Even with their own data, it is roughly equal domestic homicide victims among the genders. Okay? And I would even say that there are more domestic homicide victims that are male, okay, because a lot of it is not tracked in the statistics. So yeah, I will link these reports and these articles. You can read the rest yourself, but femicide is a complete lie, okay. The UN actually debunked it, even when they're not admitting it. And again, with 1% of difference between the victim rates, how can you then say that there's some specific targeting of women? This doesn't make any sense. It's horseshit. The UN is a misandric organization. Peace out.